David Blaine's impossible thought of cards with Jimmy Fallon. This particular card trick on Jimmy Fallon's show is one of David's most viral videos on his channel, with over 36 million views. In this trick, David Blaine takes a deck of cards and riffle shuffles it in his hands 3 times, ensuring the deck is properly mixed. He then has Jimmy take out a group of 5 cards, which are not to be seen by David. He asks Jimmy to think of one of those 5 cards, after which the cards are shuffled behind his back. David then asks Jimmy to focus only on his chosen card, as David calls out the other 4 cards one by one, placing them on the table as he names each one. In the end, Jimmy is holding on to his chosen card, which David also figures out instantly. So, does this mean Jimmy Fallon is in on the trick? Nope. In fact, this trick has a very clever method hidden within the technique of how the cards are handled. If the first thought that came to your mind was that David used a stacked deck, then you're on the right track. But that doesn't explain how David Blaine performed a riffle shuffle with a bridge using that same deck, not once, but twice, which obviously contradicts the whole point of using a stacked deck. David has performed this same trick with a group of college students as well. In that particular performance, he didn't even use his own deck, but instead used a borrowed one. So if David Blaine is using a stacked deck, then there is no way he can perform with a borrowed deck. Secondly, the specific stack he used was a mnemonic stack. But what's so unique about this particular stack? If you watch his performance closely, you'll notice that all the cards are sequenced from ace to king for each suit as he goes through the deck, which clearly means he borrowed a brand new pack. However, he appears to be rearranging the deck and doing several faro shuffles before he begins to perform. These shuffles are not random at all. In fact, they organize the new deck order into the mnemonic stack. For those who want to learn these shuffles, I have linked the tutorial for it below. In summary, the control consists of single card counts and faro shuffles. But didn't David riffle shuffle and lose the stack here? If you look closely at David Blaine's hands, you'll notice that although he appears to perform the riffle shuffle and interlocks the cards, right before he attempts the bridge, the packets are immediately split apart. Only one packet is bent with his right thumb to make it look like the cards are interlacing. What you saw was actually a false shuffle, known as Einstein's false shuffle. Here you can see a new deck order stack, a riffle shuffle, and a bridge being performed in clear view, completely deceiving our eyes. But upon flipping over the deck, the sequence of the cards remains exactly the same. The secret behind this technique is that the cards are riffled from one end, making it convincing for the viewer looking from the front. But from the exposed view, you can see a clear gap here, which is taken advantage of in order to uninterlace the 2 packets. After that, one of the packets is sprung to make it look like the cards are interlacing, as you would expect in a bridge right after a riffle. Knowing David performed a false shuffle makes everything a lot easier to follow. At this moment, when he asks Jimmy Fallon to take cards out of the spread, he does not allow him to take just any 5 cards. Instead, he gives specific instructions to take a group of cards.
Mm-hmm. Take like 5 cards, a little group, like a poker hand.
Yeah.
Good. Is that 5? Good. Don't let anybody see them, just you. Good.
By taking a group of cards and immediately cutting the deck, which you can clearly see David Blaine doing right here, by placing the top of the spread at the bottom, he only needs to take a peek at the very top and the very bottom card of the deck in his hand to know which 5 cards in sequence Jimmy has. In this case, you can clearly see that the bottom card David Blaine is holding in his left hand is the 7 of spades. According to the mnemonica stack, the 5 cards that come after the 7 of spades are the 10 of hearts, the ace of diamonds, the 4 of spades, the 7 of hearts, and the 4 of diamonds. If you fast forward to when Jimmy reveals all 5 cards, these were the exact ones he was holding the entire time. It was right here when David peeked at the top and bottom cards of his deck, using the excuse of asking Jimmy to do the same. But you may still have one question in mind. Although David Blaine knew which 5 cards Jimmy Fallon was holding, this doesn't explain how he knew exactly which particular card Jimmy had selected out of the 5 and was merely thinking of. The method behind this is extremely clever.
Think of your card specifically and do this now. Put it behind your back. Put it behind your back. No, the whole group behind your back.
Notice David Blaine's instruction to put it behind your back. This instruction intentionally makes the spectator think they have to put their thought of card behind their back. As soon as they reach to pull their card out halfway, it gives away the position of which card they had selected in their mind by giving a physical tell. Due to the clever wordplay by David Blaine, this instruction is then followed by an immediate correction.
Think of all of them, but think of your card specifically and do this now. Put it behind your back. Put it behind your back. No, the whole group behind your back. And mix it up.
This covers up the apparent miscommunication by having them place all the cards behind their back and shuffle the sequence. At this point, it doesn't matter whether they shuffle the cards behind their back, because the initial 5 cards they had in their hand were not allowed to be shuffled earlier. But in his performance on The Tonight Show, we find something fishy.
Good.
Oh my God,
And now,
don't freak me
Jimmy,
out, man.
Jimmy, put the cards behind your back.
You'll notice this moment where David Blaine moves away from Jimmy. He appears to say something, but then we see an immediate camera cut. This jump cut was done by the producers of The Tonight Show to hide the clever method David Blaine used to figure out which card Jimmy was thinking of. The performance with the students was uncut. We clearly saw his sneaky method. Now hold on, we are not done yet, because I will now cover his second trick, which is David Blaine's teleporting card trick on Jimmy Fallon's show. David Blaine began by dealing cards face up and asking the volunteers to count a total of 10 cards. To verify, one volunteer recounted them one by one. Next, he had Jimmy call stop as he dribbled the deck, landing on the 3 of diamonds. Blaine emphasized that only the number mattered, and claimed he would teleport 3 cards from his deck into the volunteer's packet, which had been held against their chest the entire time. After riffling the deck 3 times, the volunteer felt something change. When they recounted, they now had 13 cards. The cards were gathered again and held against the chest. David Blaine then turned to the second volunteer and asked him to think of a number up to 10. He stated 3. Blaine then asked a third volunteer to think of a number up to 5. They chose 4. Adding, he stated he would now move 7 cards. This time, he sprung the deck toward the packet, and the volunteer felt it thicken. Upon recounting, the packet contained 20 cards. So how did Blaine teleport the cards right into their hands not once but twice? The secret behind this trick, one might assume, was a gimmicked deck, such that the cards were in pairs and attached with adhesive. But that's not the case here. In fact, it's just clever technique and wordplay to create the illusion of randomness. At the beginning, when he counts 10 cards onto the table, he purposely does so face up. These face-up cards will soon have 3 additional cards loaded underneath them. Notice what David Blaine says at this moment.
We don't care about the number in the suit. We only care about the actual paper that makes the card.
Although it may seem like an innocent remark, where he states that the material itself, as in the cards, is what matters, not the values or suits, he is actually counting 3 cards from the top of the deck and catches a pinky break like this under the guise of picking up the 10 cards from the table. He secretly loads the 3 extra cards underneath the packet before putting the deck back onto the table. David could have just picked up all 10 cards with his right hand, but the clever technique of sliding them off the table made it necessary to involve his left hand. Now, with 10 cards face up and 3 cards face down loaded at the bottom, this clever counting technique hides the extra 3 cards as he goes through all 10 and stops at the face-down cards. With these 3 extra cards now placed against the volunteer's chest, we know logically that David has to force the number 3 onto Jimmy Fallon. He initially shows Jimmy that all the cards are different and dribbles them. Most of my viewers are familiar with basic card force techniques, including the dribble force, where a break is maintained, ensuring that wherever the volunteer stops, the magician drops the remaining cards below the break, forcing the selection. But this contradicts what we see David Blaine doing. The contradiction arises because David is holding the deck by its diagonal corners with no visible break. He does use the dribble force concept, but with a slightly different technique. In this case, he used a short card. The short card was the 3 of diamonds. A short card is a card that is trimmed slightly along the length or width, depending on its usage. In this case, it was trimmed along the width. As a result, when dribbling through the cards, a short card acts as a break, but one that's practically invisible from any angle. So now that we know how he performed the first trick, what about the second trick? He doesn't use the same tricky counting method with the packet in the volunteer's hand. In fact, we can clearly see that the volunteer placed the cards on the table and scooped them up himself. So what's going on here? Let's rewind to the moment he demonstrates to the volunteer how to count the cards onto the table. Notice that David himself is counting the cards, and he counts a total of 7 cards during this demonstration. He does this to catch a pinky break right underneath them, like this. After that, he palms the 7-card packet in his right hand, and you can catch a glimpse of the palmed cards in this close-up shot of his right hand. While everyone is focused on counting the 13-card packet, David waits for the perfect moment. That moment is when they count to 10. As soon as the 10th card is placed on the table, he slaps the 7-card packet straight onto the mess in plain sight. After the cards are gathered up by the volunteer, everything is set up. Now David has to force the number 7 onto the volunteer. This is where clever wordplay is used. Since we know that only 7 cards were added, the only number he could really force was 7. In this case, it's a combination of both multiple outs and forcing achieved through clever wording. Listen to his first statement.
Can you name a number up to 10?
His wording to the second volunteer may sound innocent, but it's actually a psychological suggestion designed to push them toward picking a higher number. A survey of over 8,000 students, based on a Reddit data study on random number selection, found that when asked to pick a number between 1 and 10, the most commonly chosen number was 7, followed by 3. In the case of David Blaine, he knew that 7 and 3 were the most commonly selected numbers. To make sure 7 was chosen, instead of saying, pick a number between 1 and 10, which offers a broad range, he subtly reworded it as up to 10, encouraging participants to pick a higher number. However, since the volunteer chose 3, which is also a common selection, it wasn't the number David was aiming for. This is why he involves the third volunteer in a little addition game, and states this,
And can you name a number up to 5?
Instead of asking them to pick a number up to 10, he limits it to 5, again encouraging a higher number. The third volunteer then picks 4, bringing the total to 7. But what if the third volunteer had picked any other number? David Blaine has 2 ways to handle it. If they pick 3, he simply says, pick a different number, since the first person already picked 3. If they picked 1, 2, or 5, David would change the situation entirely. He would turn to Jimmy and say, Hey Jimmy, now you pick a number up to 10. Jimmy obviously can't pick 3, so the most common choice left is 7. Then David would ask, do you want to go with your decision or theirs? Most of the time, the final volunteer would prefer to stick with their decision. This number selection trick relies entirely on wordplay and common selections. There's no single direct method. It's all about having multiple outs. And David Blaine, being an experienced magician, knows exactly how to get out of tricky situations. Here's more evidence for your satisfaction.
Everybody has favorite numbers up to 10. They're always different. Say your favorite number up to 10. Say a number up to 10. Say your favorite number up to 10.
8.
Say your favorite number up to
7.
10.
Watch this performance where he wants to force the number 7. Since the first and second volunteers didn't pick small numbers that added up to 7, it was the third volunteer that finally selected number 7. Here's how he handled the situation to filter out the selection.
But not on me. So
Okay.
say stop.
Stop.
On him or you? Was it him?
On Mark.
A timing force at the end, which was fairly obvious. In that case, the volunteer didn't go along with the plan, so David immediately switched to a backup.